So when it comes to anime fighting games, I actually had the opportunity to review the two My Hero Academia games that came out last month and a couple years ago. I opted not to at the time because I hadn't watched the anime and wasn't caught up on the series at all. But now things are a little different. A couple weeks ago I started watching through the series, and by the time I finished season 4 I really enjoyed it. I admit it was a bit weird deciding between the first and second game to review, but I opted for the most recent one as it's still technically a new release. So here is my review of My Hero One's Justice 2 for the Nintendo Switch. When it comes to story, I'm not going to really give you very many spoilers, even though it does take place in the middle of the series. One's Justice 2 basically picks up where the first game left off. It continues the story of Season 3, starting at the point where the students start moving into the dorms and continues through the main arc of Season 4. And just like the first game, it shows the story both from the heroes' and villains' perspectives. And the way they approach this is really nice, as the villain story is more than just reverses of all of the hero stories. They've got a lot of different events where the villains aren't at the same place as the heroes, so you're not just replaying the same exact story events over and over again from the hero story. But one thing you really need to know is context of the original story. The comic book style the game uses for its story mode does tell the main parts of the plot, but there's really a lot of emotion and tension that's left out here. Many of the really big and crucial moments of the anime during these arcs are just kind of glossed over, and some are even left out. So you don't really get that same emotion and impact that you got with the original series. When it comes to gameplay, this is a 3D arena brawler. In the same vein and style as the Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm games and the Kill la Kill game, you'll constantly be fighting 1v1 battles with enemies in large 3D arenas. Now let's dive into what all you can do with the game modes. As far as single player content is concerned, you've got story, mission, free battle, training, and arcade mode. Story allows you to go through the hero and villain campaigns, while free battle and training will let you practice and hone your skills with each character in preparation for the other modes. And then you've got mission mode, which aside from story is probably the biggest piece of single player content you've got here. This lets you start your own hero agency, recruiting and scouting various characters and taking them on missions. And once you think you've honed your skills enough, you can dive into network mode to take part in online multiplayer. Do note that local multiplayer is coming to the game in a future patch, as was just announced a few days ago, but it's not here yet. But more important than the game modes, the character roster has significantly increased since the first game. You've got 35 different characters to choose from here, which includes the entire first game's roster and its DLC along with everything new. And that brings us into the combat. As I said earlier, this is a 3D arena brawler, much in the vein of the Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm games. You and your opponent run around the arena while your backup or sidekick characters stay in the background until their assist attacks are charged up. You've got a fairly simplistic combo system here, with each button designated to a certain attack type. The Y button is used for basic physical attacks, while X and A are used for special quirk attacks. You've also got aerial combat, where all of the combos act differently, along with a dash system. This definitely requires some experimentation, especially when you want to get your combos just right so you can land your supers when they're charged up. But overall, I still think it's a fairly simple system without the need for technical button inputs. By itself, this combo system is pretty fun and not too bad, but how well they represent everyone's quirks is really what I like about it. Now, some of these quirks are very easy to represent, like All Might and Deku's power enhancements. But they also take the time to implement more technical quirks that have after effects. For example, Eraserhead can disable his opponent's quirk buttons for about a minute, while Toga can get access to her opponent's blood and transform into that character momentarily. It's things like this and just how flashy the game looks that I feel My Hero fans will really appreciate about these games. But this combat system isn't without its flaws. The camera of the game doesn't really move very much. That means that if you get blown in the opposite direction of the camera doesn't follow you, so it's behind you one moment and it's behind your opponent the next. This, along with all of the wall climbing features, make the game feel very disorienting, especially when you're fighting the same character. It's easy to get lost in the chaos of battle and forget which character is you. Though that's also what the last game mode is for, customization. A lot of people who play the game will tell you that this game is great because it's a character dress-up game. As you go through the story mode, you'll unlock tons and tons of cosmetics that you can throw on the characters. Some of these are attachments and accessories from other characters, while others are palette swaps and alternate costumes. And this is something that I had a lot of fun with, especially when you take someone like Deku Froppy or Uraraka and start throwing dragon wings and Bakugo's grenade gauntlets onto them. There's really a wacky number of combinations that you can do for each character, and that's something that's really neat. But despite how much fun I had with this mode, let's talk about content and length. The story mode of this game isn't very long. I cleared both the hero and villain story in about 7 or 8 hours. While the mission mode and character customization are a lot of fun, it's still not that much content for the $60 price tag. Now let's dive into controls for a moment, because I had a very weird thing happen during a boss fight. When I got to a specific boss fight, and only that one in the villain story mode, I couldn't use third-party controllers anymore. I could undock the Switch and use handheld mode, or use the Joy-Con separately, but my Pro Controller and 8-bit Do SN30 Pro would no longer function during that fight. And now let's get into presentation. Graphically, this game looks absolutely beautiful in both docked and handheld modes. There's a lot of detail on the character models, and just seeing everything happening on screen is just a treat for any fan of My Hero. And as far as performance is concerned, there are some frame drops, but it mostly has to do with certain stages and certain boss fights. The game mostly stays at a steady 30 frames per second, but whenever you launch someone into a destructible object or go through certain boss fights later on in the story mode, you'll definitely see a lot more frame drops. They're not going to be huge, but they will happen often. And finally, let's get into battery life. On the original model, My Hero 1's Justice 2 has a battery range of 2 hours and 43 minutes up to 3 hours and 15 minutes. On the Nintendo Switch Lite, it has a range of 2 hours and 56 minutes up to 4 hours and 13 minutes. And on the V2 or Redbox 2019 model, it has a range of 4 hours and 6 minutes up to 5 hours and 46 minutes. In conclusion, this game brings a lot of My Hero Academia action to the handheld world. Now on the downside, the game doesn't last very long, and it's got some issues with its camera and frame rate. But if you're a fan of the series and enjoy arena brawlers, you'll definitely love how they handle and implement everyone's quirks into the combat system. Reviews to Go rates My Hero 1's Justice 2 for the Nintendo Switch a 7.5 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thanks for watching and have a great day.